Here to really take a little bit of a successful bow. The production that we had over the last 6 months was spectacular. And just a few weeks ago, we had the biggest victory of them all when you passed the One Big Beautiful Bill. And the law, I think we have a chance in the midterms. I don't understand why they say that when you win the presidency, you always almost automatically lose the midterms, because nobody's had a more successful period of time than we have. So based on that, we should do great, and we'll see.
We'll see. That was President Trump giving a speech to fellow Republican lawmakers as he marked the 6 months of his second term in office. Trump claims his poll numbers among Republicans are at record levels, despite the recent controversy surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein files that has splintered his base. Trump posted on social media yesterday, quote, "My poll numbers within the Republican Party and MAGA have gone up significantly," adding, quote, "They have hit 90%, 92, 93, and 95% in various polls, and all are Republican Party records." It's unclear which polls Trump was referring to, or if he actually has record support. A CBS News YouGov poll out this weekend shows 89% of Republicans surveyed approve of the job that Trump is doing. But Republicans are split over how the Trump administration is handling everything related to the Epstein case. Meanwhile, Trump's overall approval dropped to 42%, down 3 points from a CBS poll conducted just last month. Joining us now, professor at Princeton University, Eddie Glaude Jr. Eddie, Trump has been able to shake off many of the other controversies throughout these last 6 months, but it's the Epstein allegations that seem to linger, especially within his own party, which I think at the start might have felt like, really, this is the thing that's splintering everyone, and yet it also feels all too fitting. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, it was great to see you this morning, Ali. I think it's wrapped up in his base's deep suspicion of the deep state. This odd story, this story around pedophilia, this story around the baseness of people who were in Epstein's circle, right, has been a kind of rallying cry among Trump's base about the kind of corruption, the moral debauchery of the deep state, and so that Donald Trump is trying to dismiss it. He misunderstands in this sense that the engine of his popular base. So I see why it's lingering, Alan.
I see why it's lingering. I'm interested to see how much longer it does, but it feels interesting that this is the story that's captivating for several weeks on end as they hit the official 6-month mark of their second term in office. I wonder, to me, the previous hallmark or significant policy moment from the first 6 months was the deportation efforts from the Trump administration. And when you look deeper into that CBS YouGov poll, the striking thing to me was that it tells a story of some Americans seeing that they're not quite getting what they thought they voted for, especially when it comes to who's being deported here. You're watching specifically less people thinking that the administration is prioritizing dangerous criminals, and thusly support for the deportation effort is steadily decreasing. What does that tell you about the first 6 months here?
Yeah, there are some people who are kind of having buyer's remorse in some sense, that this is not what they thought they were getting. I think there's a sense in which Donald Trump and the ideologues around him have taken as their particular charge to dismantle the Great Society, to dismantle the last vestiges of the New Deal, and that the little shreds of the social safety net that we have is just simply disappearing. And then you combine that with the freedom snatching of people who have been in communities for decades, for most of their lives, right? Disrupting neighborhoods, forcing people to make choices, right? Has really placed a lot of folk in this very, very awkward position. So the kind of cultural red meat that has been thrown to the MAGA base, some people might think that it is a bit spoiled, and so they don't know what they've been eating, and it's not been healthy for them to strain the analogy, Alan.
But when you look then at the splintering within MAGA, or at least the coalition, maybe these folks aren't wearing red hats, but they voted for Trump in 2024. When you see the splintering over Epstein, over deportations, what does that tell you about MAGA going forward? Maybe for the next 6 months, but certainly as we forecast ahead to 2026 or even 2028.
MAGA has always been an unstable, in so many ways, a coalition between corporatists and those who are right-wing populist and the like. I still think, Ali, that they're committed to a white nationalist agenda. And at the end of the day, that agenda will be paramount. There will be some pain, there will be some hurt, but I think for the most part, they will embrace that over and against the alternative, which, of course, for them is a kind of communist, far right, far left, left wing. And so there will be these disputes, but at the end of the day, I think they will come home as they always do.
Yeah, I think they'll come home. I think the question, too, for me is under whose banner? Is it someone like J.D. Vance? Is it someone like a Pete Hegseth? I think that's going to be interesting to see the way that those key figures within MAGA end up orienting themselves around these schisms. But then, of course, on the other side of the aisle, you've watched Democrats, specifically on the Epstein issue, try to sort of get in on it, sustain the news cycle, and sustain the schism making that's happening within MAGA. What do you make of the way that Democrats are now latching on to this? OK, let's be transparent about Epstein effort, when for the most part Democrats have not done much on this issue in the past. There's the exception of some.
You know, I understand the politics of it all. I think, you know, you see a weakness, a chink in the armor, and you want to just kind of exploit it. I get that. But I think that the circumstances of our living right now require even more serious efforts to articulate a vision that's counter to what Russell Voigt and what the MAGA folk are doing in government. So I understand the move politically, but I think the Democrats need to offer a more substantive alternative vision to what we're experiencing in the country right now.
So do you see any Epstein upside for them? I mean, one Democratic lawmaker was saying to me that the reason that they see upside on this is that it could sort of pierce the veil for Trump supporters who were blindly open to believing what the president said. And maybe this is the way to at least get them open to other ideas, if not from Democrats, then just not from Trump.
Well, perhaps, you know, I think, you know, I mean, it could happen, Allie, but I think at the end of the day, these folks are committed to owning the libs. These folks are committed to the nationalist agenda that Donald Trump and his folk are putting forward. So I understand what the Democrats are doing, but I think at the end of the day, they need to spend their energy trying to offer a substantive alternative vision to the nation that to Donald Trump and the MAGA folk. And I think that at the end of the day will help save the country, not just simply just exploiting a chink in Donald Trump's armor.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely an instance of having to walk and chew gum, being able to take up space in this news cycle that's certainly inconvenient at best for the president, but then also focusing on the basic issues, patching up that foundation within the Democratic Party that is, frankly, in need of being patched after the 2024 election. And, of course, I do think there's a difference between that solid 30-some-odd% of MAGA voters that we always see backing the president and then the other folks who just went with him during the election because they felt that he was the better choice. Eddie Glaude, Jr., always love having you. Thank you for coming on this morning.